All right. Hello, everybody. Luke here, as you can see, aerobic excellent specialist. Never gets old, right? So, all right. So tonight's a little different for our Run Club members and our Run Club Light members. I open this up to everybody, just a little bit of ask me anything, even though with the Run Clubbers, the initial questions I'm starting out are all yours and from the community on LukeHumphreyRunning.com. So for those who are not in the Run Club or Run Club Light, we do something like this every couple weeks. We've been doing this for a couple months now. It's been pretty fun. It's usually more one topic based, and I'll do a presentation and I take Q&A afterwards. I go for about 45 minutes on the presentation, and then I do 15 minutes of Q&A after that. But tonight, obviously, it's a little different. It's a little bit more laid back, I think, a little bit more, not that it's really super serious, but it's not as focused on one thing. So so let's jump into it. So I have a few pages of questions here from people I just copied and pasted from the last few days, and I'll go into it. So I do want to go into something real quick for the Run Club members. So I sent out a couple messages if you're in a couple of our groups. So if you're in the Run Club, in the Run Club Light, and you in that social aspect of the community, it looks a lot like Facebook inside there, right? And I'll show everybody what it looks like a little bit later. But the groups, there's groups and there's forums, and it can be a little overwhelming. And I'm really trying to keep it as simple as possible. So I'm going to be deleting some of that and putting some of the focus more on forums for those things. And don't get caught up with your generic forums. There's a ton of stuff you can really do with these things. And I'll show you a little bit later, but we'll be noticing that. And also the theme that we are using through WordPress has updated, and it's actually pretty slick. So be interesting to see that too. So I just wanted to jump on that because I did send a message out to some people today. So you see some things changing around in there. But I know you are all here for the questions, and let's jump into it. So from Dennis, Big Dennis, my dad's named Dennis. My dad's 6'8", Dennis, and I never got that height, but I'm a runner, not a basketball player. But anyway, Dennis is asking us a couple good questions here for us. His first question was basically goal pace or current pace for workouts. And I like that question. It's something I've actually been thinking about a lot more lately too. So I'm more in the camp of kind of where you are at more for the early part of the season. So let's just say you're going to start the Hanson's advanced plan, right? And so, if you come off a marathon, you're going to have a few weeks where you're not really doing as much in terms of workouts and things like that. So it might make more sense to start off at your current pace and then build up into that goal pace, because I will say the biggest thing people do is they jump too much into the training to start, and they probably go a little bit overboard with the paces. So I'm definitely in that camp of more current pace at the start, but with the idea of building into your goal pace. And there's a few ways you can do that. We talked a little bit about this in the season planning webinar we did a couple weeks ago. So if you're in the Run Club, you can go back and watch that episode. But essentially what you could do is if you start off with 4-mile tempo runs or something like that, you can just do your current pace, right? And then as those increase, you go into more of the goal pace. Another way to do it would just kind of be almost like cut down style, where maybe the first mile or two are at your current pace, and then you work to where your last mile is at your goal pace, and you can kind of break it up a little bit like that. So there's a number of ways you can do it, but yeah, it doesn't have to necessarily be full on goal pace right at the start of the segment. And I think too, you have to look at if you haven't done speed training in a long time, and all of a sudden you're doing speed work, and that seems a lot more aggressive than what you're maybe doing in a marathon season before. Because right now is a perfect time to say that, because coming off of a marathon segment for a lot of people. And then a lot of people are going to do a short speed segment now and then jump into full marathon training later in the summer. And so if they're doing a true dedicated 5K, 10K speed segment, they probably haven't touched those speeds in a while. So they might want to go more about what their current pace is and then work into their goal pace for the speed. But I feel like speed comes around a little bit quicker than what marathon pace does. So yeah, there's definitely ways you can do that. And the second question is, what's a reasonable stretch goal for a single marathon segment? And so honestly, it depends on the person. So if you take a person who is more of a novice runner, maybe they followed a pretty low mileage program in the past, and all of a sudden they're doing more training, and they were kind of really not following much of a structure or anything like that. And say they ran, 4:30, 4:45 in the marathon. It's not uncommon to see that person to take 30, 45, 60 minutes off of a marathon time in one segment, right? But obviously the faster you get, the more difficult that becomes, right? So on the other, the lower mileage, more beginner to novice, and they go kind of make a switch from just kind of haphazardly training into more structured training. I could easily see a 10 to 15% improvement in time, maybe even more than that in one segment, as long as they can stay healthy. For a veteran runner, like I know Dennis is, something in like the 0.5% to maybe 2, maybe 3% is probably going to be more likely. And like I said, the faster you get, the harder that becomes. And I'll use myself as an example. In my prime, it's 2:14 high in the marathon. If I was 1% faster, I would have been a contender to make an Olympic team, and otherwise I was still a pretty good runner, right? But it was literally night and day between like where the people like, Jared Ward and Meb and all those guys were in, 2016 versus where I was. That's two different levels, right? Even though to somebody who runs 3.5 hours, they're not, might not make much difference, but the faster you are, the more those time gaps are different. So it would be a lot smaller the faster you are, or just more experienced you are too. So if you've run, 20 years and you've averaged, 60, 70 miles a week a year, that percentage of improvement is going to be very small. It's probably not going to come strictly from a training segment. It's probably going to come from the other things you're doing, like flexibility, strength training. That's where you find those, like, what are the minimalist gains, or whatever, the auxiliary gains, where it's, fractions of a percent that you're going to be gaining. So that's where I'm at on that. So those are two great questions from Dennis. Tina asked, this is an easy one. Do you have any NYC marathon specific training plans like I do for Boston? Unfortunately, no, I don't. It comes up every year. And of course, I've just dawdled on it, and I have not done that. And you're definitely not the first person to ask, Tina. And I recognize that is a gap that needs to be filled. And so the thing with that, though, is, almost the Boston, to me, New York is tougher than Boston, but you have a lot of the same elements that you would in Boston. You do have some late downhills. The biggest problem is that the first half, I feel, is way more hillier in New York, and you have the bridges and then all that good stuff, but you have a significant amount of downhill as well. So a lot of the same elements are there, and it wouldn't take much to really, kind of use the Boston plan for New York. The biggest difference too is like the very first mile straight uphill, right? And right up the bridge. And then the second mile is all downhill when you go down the other side of the bridge. So you have some stuff like that. So I feel like the hills are maybe a little bit more extreme in New York. And then the biggest thing to me as well is the fact that when Boston, you have a lot of just 2-lane country highway roads for a lot of it, right? A lot of asphalt roads. And it might not seem like it, but there's a big difference between asphalt and then 1.5 feet of concrete that you'd be running on for the vast majority of New York City. It took me a very long time to recover after New York, because it beat the heck out of my legs. And I'm pretty sure it was because of that. And I mean, it's a tough course for sure, but I think a lot of it too is just the concrete. So some of it's not even really what you can train for unless you're in New York and you can get on those types of streets and stuff like that. So, but yes, I think I do need to, tweak some of that Boston stuff and make it a New York specific plan, but you could definitely do that as well. I did not copy the name on here. And last weekend, this is still Tina, I believe. Last weekend, she ran 149.5 using the Hanson's method and cut some time training because of life. Happens. Moved to a new city. That will definitely do it. What is a realistic goal time for NYC, knowing that unless I am injured, I will not miss or cut short any training. So that's a little bit tougher. I'm getting a few questions about Hilly Marathons. As far as what you could run, I felt like for me, New York was a good 4 minutes slow. So if you extrapolate that out to like 3.5, 4 hours, you can see where that's going to be more like 8 to 12 minutes slow. That might be a little aggressive on how much you'd lose, but I would go in there expecting that you could probably lose a significant amount of time. And so just what my notes here is, race equivalency chart, you can add about 4.5 minutes to that. So in this case, 149 is about 3:47 for the marathon. And so I would add at least 5 minutes to that. But, it doesn't, who knows, right? Like if you're a person who trains on naturally hilly terrain, it's probably not going to affect you as much because you're a lot more used to that. You take somebody who trains on flat and is really searching to get on hills, it's going to have a lot bigger impact on that person. So you really can't. So to me, and this goes to Brina's question, is that it really depends. And for me, it's more about the effort that you're running. You have to recognize what effort is equating to a marathon type effort. And pace is really going to kind of be secondary to that. And so I guess what I would say as far as training though, how do you train for that? And so that's, I guess, what I would train for is train for in this case, 352 to 355 on the hill. So if you're doing your tempo runs on hillier routes, just try to be in there and see what the paces average out to be, right? So obviously going uphill, you're going to be slow. Going downhill, you're going to be a little bit faster. See what it averages out to, right? And then you can really get a good gauge on what is going to be more is going to be more acceptable for what you're going to be capable of. Okay. So, but yeah, then that's the other thing in my notes too, is that training will definitely have to mimic the course, and then you can get a very good idea of it. So I can't give you necessarily a specific answer on time, but how I would do it is get on the courses that are going to be closest to what the terrain is going to be for the marathon, and then kind of get a feeler for what you're going to be capable of. If you go out there and you try to blast at 350 pace and it just beats crap out of you, then it's too aggressive, right? And you can back off from there. And then, I would rather be going there being conservative and saying, oh man, I'm only going to run 355. And you get to 20 miles and you're able to pick it up and run 352, 353. That's going to be a great opportunity to pick it up a little bit. So, that wouldn't be a bad situation to be in. All right. Alethea, sorry if I mispronounced that. I suffer seriously in summer heat training, can never meet my goal times in fall races because I can't run without walk breaks to cool down. Is there anything else I can do besides running before the sun comes up? More cross training ? And so I didn't think of this, but I just thought about it because I spent last summer, I bought both my wife and I cooling vests. That's actually a great thing to do, especially if you're training later in the morning or if you're training in the evening. I bought them. It was more for construction workers and stuff. And it came in this little briefcase, but you put it in the freezer and then it's just the packets in the freezer. You can take the packets out, put it in the vest, wear it for an hour before you do your, half hour maybe before you start doing your workout. And that has been proven to improve performance. So that's one thing you can do specifically. Obviously there's to me, the biggest thing for when people, and this is across the board in the summer, that people make the mistake is that they want to push exact paces. So if they're trying to run 350 pace for the marathon, they're going to go hell or high water to run 350 pace in those workouts or for whatever it is. And they really dig themselves a hole that they can't get out of. So my suggestion would be to really utilize the adjusted paces for heat and humidity. I have this on Final Surge. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick and I'll show you. Let's see if I can do this. I'll do full screen here. Let's do final surge. And so this is my calendar and final surge. If you go over to this little calculator button and you click that, obviously you want to use Hanson's because it's the best. These other guys, you don't want to use those guys. So let's say you're going to do a marathon. I'm just kidding. Let's say you want to run 3:45 in the marathon. And then let's say your average starting temperature, let's say it's 75 degrees. Let's say your average humidity is 90%. Wind speed, we don't really need to worry about in the summer. You can do that more in the winter. Let's calculate some paces. All right, so if we go down there, so for one, that'll show you what your adjusted race time would be if you raced in those conditions. You can see that's a big range. So like if you're somebody in the South who trains in warm weather pretty much all year, you're going to be on the faster side of this. If you're somebody like me up in Michigan, where 6 months out of the year it's below freezing, I'm probably going to be more on the slower side of stuff. So it really depends on where you're coming from too. So then this will give you adjusted paces, right? So you can tell that by if my marathon pace at 3:45 is 8:34 a mile, and I go down to marathon tempos, those are adjusted, and that's a big adjustment, right? And so I think that's the easiest thing you can do. And then if you're doing a structured workout, right? So I can just go in there and I can click on my workout builder. I can go to edit, and then I can just, cancel that out if I wanted to. And I'll just I'm going to set up my own pace target. And then I'll say 9:15 to 9:52. Boom, there we go. And then I can send that to my Garmin. And off I go, right? So that's already in my watch. I don't have to do anything. It's already adjusted, right? So that's an easy thing to do. And I think more people should do that, especially right now is like the easiest time to do that, because I'll use myself as an example here. So last week, my daughter had a softball game. We're sitting there. It was 45 degrees. We're wearing parkas, cold, right? And today was 85 degrees, right? So we have these massive swings in temperature right now. And so adjusting those paces, especially early on, is going to make a big difference. And then obviously as summer goes on, you're more adapted to those heats. You can get those adjusted paces closer to what the actual goal paces are. So that to me is the biggest thing you can do, is adjust those paces, especially early on as you get acclimated to the weather. And then you'll just naturally kind of start just running faster too on those. So that's the best thing I could do. And then I guess the only other thing I would say to that is if you really wanted to, would be to space out your workouts more. So instead of going, if you're following one of the book plans, going Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday, maybe you want to go Tuesday, Friday, Sunday, something like that, where you can get a couple extra days recovery between those two big SOS workouts, and it makes a big difference. But then you really have to focus on hydration and things like that, because people are always surprised when I tell them, hey, listen, I mean, if you're in the summer, it's not uncommon to see people really needing to drink 3-4+ liters of fluid a day, right? And so that's going to be including what you're doing for the workout and then all your other stuff too. But it makes a huge difference on there. But I would say the number one thing you could do is adjust your paces early on using a calculator like that. And if you're just writing stuff down, or you're building your own workouts, you can use that calculator. All you really have to do is have a Final Surge account, and you can get to that calculator. Okay, so that would not be anything you don't have access to. So, all right. The other thing too is I did discuss this for run clubbers who are listening in the season planning thing. So just a real quick thing. I personally have made a personal decision to move my fall marathons to at least November to December. So my window of opportunity really is more like Indy to Cal, and then maybe Houston, so that I don't have to start training for a marathon until September, right? That's what I've decided. And I'll focus on other things in the summer. And I had some other things on that too. But all right. But that's one thing I would think about. All right. So Carrie's asking about, and I know I get this question a lot. I don't necessarily have a great answer for it, but I do want to address it. So can you talk about adjusting marathon paces for the reality that we will probably be running 26.4 to 26.6 miles according to our watches? For example, a 3:30 marathoner would make up roughly 3.5 to 7 seconds per mile. If I'm pacing myself on my watch, I would really need to run 7:53 pace, not 8-minute pace to safely make it. So I have a hard time buying into that, because then that means when you are training, you're going to be training too hard. I think you have to, like, if your goal pace is exactly 8 minutes, I guarantee you're not going to have very many miles that are exactly 8 minutes. You're going to have some that are 8:05. You might have some that are 7:50. So you're going to have a natural range anyway. So I personally don't think it's a huge deal. I will say this, like, if you're in a race like Chicago or New York, where there's 40 or 50,000 people around you, yeah, you're just going to end up running further, because you just got to weave around all those people, right? And it stinks. But I think your biggest thing is not to get panicked at that, and just kind of recognize where you're at, especially at like 10K, at half marathon, at 30K, something like that, where you know where you should be and whether you're fast or slow on that. Because if you get to 30K and you're a little bit slow, but you were conservative and you didn't panic, you can still make that up, right? Even if you had like 30 seconds to make up, you could make that up in the last 10, 12K of a marathon. That to me is not necessarily an issue. And by the time you get to that point, hopefully things have spread out a little bit enough that you have that opportunity. So I will say this, like, if you're like a four plus marathoner, like, to me, you're almost, like, races like Chicago are touted as fast, but they're not necessarily fast for that group of people, because you are around so many other people, and it's almost a destination thing. And it's just to say, hey, I did it. I personally like, and I hate saying it because I have a really good relationship with Chicago Marathon and stuff like that. But to me, it's always like, people go in there with the expectations that Chicago going to run fast, but it's hard when you're dodging around tens of thousands of people for a long part of that. And that's where I've kind of gotten more into, like, the races like Indianapolis and Cal and Houston, where it's, yeah, you got a lot of people, but it's still half the field that those other races are. It's just one of those things. But not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying, like, you have to go in there with not more realistic, but expectations. Like, hey, this could get kind of nasty. I'm probably going to run further than 26.2. And plus, too, you don't know what it's really at, because, like, a race like Chicago, you lose the Garmin signal. The first mile, you lose the Garmin signal as soon as you go down the tunnel underneath the streets, and you pop back out on the other side of McCormick Place. You lose your signal anyway. So I would say you can't really worry about that in your training. You still have to train for what you want to run. Know your splits, know where you're going to be at, and give yourself a little bit of a range. Like, at 8-minute pace, if you're running anywhere from 7:50 to 8:10, you're pretty good, right? Like, you're pretty solid. You just don't want to be like 7:40, 7:30, and then say, oh, wow, putting time in the bank, and then lose all that time at the end, right? So that would be my advice for that. And don't panic on that. And so, and that's part of one of the things too, where we get so. I was actually going to read this today. I saw Brad Stahlberger, what's his name, the Passion Paradox guy with Steve Magnus and that. But an article on Outside Run, it was talking about how, like, we're just so addicted to these numbers on watches and stuff like that. And I would absolutely agree that we just get so stuck on some of that stuff. And, we've got that, it's not the end all be all. As long as you're pretty close, you're going to be pretty good. So that's what I would say about worrying about that. Training through the heat. And I think David asked this, how to adjust. I talked about that, so I need to go into that again. It might be its own topic for another day. I'm going deep dive into that, but like I said, adjusting those paces, especially early on, is key. Tiffany, I want to work on my speed in the summer, and based on your goal setting webinar, I think a 10K plan over the summer would be fun to do. I want to start the 12-week intermediate 10K the last week of May, which will finish around 8:14, but this does not give me enough transition time into a 14 or 16-week marathon cycle. So her question is basically, how do I make those two plans fit? And so I would say the easiest thing you could do is your first plan. If you're already running, so like with her, I'm assuming she's already running. If she's not going to start until towards the end of May, she's already running, right? So does she need to really repeat the first week or so of that 10K plan? Probably not, right? Or she could modify those 2 weeks, combine it down into 1 week, and just kind of pick what workout she wants to do out of the 2 weeks, instead of doing both weeks of the workout. So you can do that. That's the easiest thing to do, is scale that back. Because if you are using our plans to piece together multiple segments, yeah, it's hardly ever going to work out perfectly. The other thing you could do is do that on the other end of that. So assuming she goes through that 10K plan and she goes all the way through the end of that, she's already done a ton of speed, right? So even in a 14 or 16 week plan, you're still going to have a couple of weeks of just building up your volume, right? So you could easily take off a couple of those first couple of weeks and really jump right into the 12 week part of the segment, which is going to be more of the meat and potatoes part of the training plan, and you're good to go. You just want to, between that 10K and that marathon plan, maybe give yourself a few days of just easy running, and then pick it up later on, 3 to 5 days easy running, let your body recover a little bit, bounce back from the segment, and then just jump into training. It's not long enough where it's going to make a big difference in how you feel, especially if you're running easy mileage. So that's the easiest thing to do, guys. Like, look at where you can scale that back. And then if you can, like, if she could move, if she could move her 8/14 date back a couple weeks, maybe that gives her time for enough 14, 16 weeks. So there's always things you can do, but that would be the biggest thing. Easiest thing would be, where are you coming from to where you're going to start with the next plan? If it's going to take a big step back from where you're at to the start of the next plan, then they cut like the first week or so off of that off. And then the same thing on the second plan. If it's going to be a big drop in where you're at, or you've already done so much of that work already, we can afford to miss some of that work. It's not a big deal if you cut that off. You turn that 14-week plan into a 12-week plan. You're still going to be pretty well off. And if you still wanted one workout in the first week that you would have cut off, just put that in the week that you are going to do, and then use it as a kind of a bridge workout from where you're currently at. You go to this workout, and then you'll pick up the schedule as it is. So you can definitely mesh that around. It's not a big deal. All right. Daniel is asking, how do I schedule strength training during a marathon training cycle? And I think somebody else just asked about this as well. He is currently doing a 16-week marathon plan in addition to the 6-week Glute Powerhouse plan. Do you like stacking the SOS marathon workout and the glute workout on the same day, or match easy recovery days with the glute workout? So I'll speak to general things here. So the glute workout is a very specific workout. I personally probably wouldn't have done it during a marathon plan. I would have waited till after my marathon and done it during like my recovery and base phase of my next segment. But it's still kind of the same guidelines that I would give for just strength for runners, things like that. So the simple answer is things like core, our leg circuit that I put into a lot of plans. These can be done almost any time, right? So right after an easy run, I like to do, it could be done the day of a workout. It could be done before a workout, whatever, right? It's not overly straining. You can pretty much fit that in whenever you have time. Things like our strength for runners, which are really not too much far as equipment based, they're more movement based, general strength type of things. Those you have pretty good leniency with as well. Those could be done the day before a workout. They could be done several hours after a workout. So if you do a workout Tuesday morning, you could either do that workout sometime Monday, or you could do it Tuesday evening, several hours after your workout. So there's still a lot of room to play with there. There's not a ton of rules on that. And this can be done really up until the start of your taper. If you're not going into anything other than like one of our strength for runners plans, you can do that all the way up to the start of the taper. Give yourself a couple weeks if you want to scale back. But even then, I would still do core and leg circuit stuff up until 4 or 5 days before your marathon. Jay Deshari, who I've talked about a lot, did webinars on this. I have class lessons in the Run Club. I actually have a mini course on strength training. I discussed Jay Deshari quite a bit. He says heavy, so you go through your phase of like core, legs, you build the gym. Oh, there we go. All right, sorry. Stream. You go core, leg, general strength, heavy lifting. So squats, deadlifts, those types of things, the heavier stuff. You do those the day before a workout, or something like, it's like 72. It's like gosh, it's like 2 or 3 days after workout, which in our situation doesn't really work. So you've really got to stick to the day before a workout for that. Um, and then you could do that up to 6 weeks out from your marathon. And then he would actually switch to more plyometric based stuff. So, like box jumps and stuff, but it's not like box jumps you see on, CrossFit and stuff like that. These are just small, quick actions, stuff like that, right? So jumping rope, stuff, lateral movement, stuff like that. So, and I'll be honest, I'm a little hesitant on that. When he talks about that, he's never marathon specific, and I've never been able to find anybody to give me a specific answer on that. If I would actually do as a marathoner plyometric stuff 6 weeks before my marathon. So I would have probably approached that with some caution. But that's what he says. And I trust him for all that stuff. So he's worked with a ton of runners, ton of very good runners. And so I would definitely believe him, but I would trust and verify, right? So that's how I would handle that. But yeah, so heavier stuff day before a workout, and then you can do the workout. So it's actually showing it kind of actually helps the workout because you kind of prime that system up. All right. Jacqueline asked me a question, and this is pretty personal, but she asked me, she wanted to know, she was very specific on this, but I think it's a good point for a lot of people, myself included. So her question is around iron deficiency, in which I do have a blog post which she mentions. Is it possible to be noticing performance declines like reduced aerobic capacity, diminishing response to training with a ferritin level of 84, which for a woman is pretty good. Like I feel like I've had women I've coached where their doctor said they're okay and their ferritin's like 15, but which it is for the normal sedentary person, but for a high training female athlete, that's very low. And that was as soon as we got that up, boom, we were hitting some PRs there. But anyway, so not knowing, she admits she doesn't know whether this level represents a drop from previous, as levels had never been checked before. So that would be the first thing. And I think she recognizes that, like, you kind of need a baseline. And that's why I do believe regular blood work, if you're not like, if you're just going out and you're training just to have fun or whatever, but if you're looking for performance, you train a lot of miles, you train pretty hard all year round, regular blood work is important. But it's got to be read by the right people, right? So that's why, I don't want to plug it, but that's why I like Inside Tracker. That's why I'm associated with them, because you get it's super easy to get the blood work done, but it's also really good because it's based around you personally, and it's around what you do as an athlete, and you can get some really good information. I learned out a ton of stuff about myself. So if you want to know, because I have a code for you, so if you want to know, I can give that to you. Just reach out, and I will be happy to give that code to you. But so moving on, I have noticed all these things for the past several months, particularly with my recent Boston Marathon and performance. Could low iron be at least partially to blame, or do I need to look at another cause? You mentioned that runners will often feel they lose their spunk with levels lower than 50. And I can definitely relate to this. So yeah, I said 50 to 150 is really kind of what I've come to know as the ideal levels for endurance athletes. So at 84, she's right in the middle there, right? So I don't know. But I've also read where 75 is really kind of where people want to be at too, as far as an endurance athlete. So if you go by that number, she's probably right on the edge, and it maybe could be. But my biggest thing with that is we don't know a lot of information here. And that's kind of the point I wanted to make. And she recognizes that, right? She's recognizing that. So it's not knocking her at all. So that's one number. We have only one number, the ferritin, which there's a lot of other things associated with iron. So we need to know, like, what the transferrin is, what the serum iron is, binding capacity. All those things can give us a lot more information. So like for myself, I had mine done, and I have low ferritin. Mine's right around that 50 level. But my serum iron is high. And so what does that mean, right? So like, how am I going to combat that? Do I want to take an iron supplement when my serum iron is high? So that's what I'm working on. And for me, I looked at other things like vitamin D, magnesium. Those are both fairly low in me. So supplementing with them can actually help boost those, make those numbers more where they need to be. So it's more of a whole picture, right? And so just one number by itself may be an indicator, but it always helps to have that number. And then you throw in the fact she just got done training for Boston. It might have been a brutal segment. She might have had a brutal winter, trained really hard, and just, kind of overdid it, right? So we don't know, and we don't know those things. But my point being more is that one number can't necessarily isn't going to give you the whole picture. And so knowing more of those numbers is very, very important. And then I would say getting those numbers read by somebody who's going to interpret that for you, right? So if you're a fairly high level runner, which I say most people, if you're training for a marathon, you're running regularly, you're training hard most of the year, you're going to need to have numbers specific for your population, right? Like taking a general number for the average sedentary American is not going to fit you well, right? So you got to make sure it's read by the right person. All right. So that's what I would say to that, and just probably need to make sure you have the whole picture there. But it's a start, right? And it couldn't be, but it might point you in the right direction to look at what those other numbers are. Didn't write this person's name down. So my goal is Chicago in October. It will be my first marathon in almost 30 years. Do you allow for shorter races during the training cycle? No, just kidding. No. I guess one people like to hound me on is I don't like racing. I don't like racing a lot during marathon segments. But for this reason, I would say if you're in a situation where you really don't know where you're at and you need to get baseline numbers, yes, there are certain places where a race makes sense. So if you're following one of the book plans, I would say a 10K towards the end of the speeds portion of the training, because you'll have a lot of that work in. You should be able to run a fairly decent 10K, actually pretty good 10K. I've had a lot of people who PR'd in the 10K just from doing this because they've actually put a dedicated 6-8 weeks together for that, and they were able to do pretty well. And then they're just overall stronger as well. And so I would say a 10K over a 5K, because the closer you are to a marathon, the more realistic point of view it's going to give to you as far as what you're capable of doing in the marathon too. So I would say a 10K then. And then I also do like a half marathon treated as a hard workout. And that's the key. You got to treat it like a hard workout. It's more like a long marathon tempo, 3 to 5 weeks out from the marathon. I think that's another good place. If you can do that at marathon pace on tired legs, and you can handle that pace pretty well, you're in good shape for the marathon. All right. But overall, I don't like using races as workouts unless I am individually working with the person and I can trust that they're going to treat it like they're supposed to be treating it, not just go buck wild with it. And then, because if you do, like, you're missing what we're trying to get out of it, right? So if you're just racing, then you're trying to race yourself into shape, and that's not really helping us either. I'd rather spend that time training, but in the right circumstances, races do make sense, and those I just gave you. Okay, wow. So that was it for the questions that I had received. Okay, all right. So there is a few on here. So let's jump into that. Let's see. So Brina's, I feel like I answered Brina's earlier on. It was coupled with the other one. Yeah. So again, with that, just I think if you're racing out a really hilly course, you have to let go of pace and just really be more about the effort, and the pace is going to end up being what it is. So monitor that effort. If it's feeling harder than marathon effort, back it off. And then in the places that you can pick up the pace on the downhills and the flats, then you do that. But I think if you try to associate a certain pace with it, then what's going to happen is you're going to stick to that pace even if the course is harder than what you'd originally planned for. It's hard to put together a specific pace for that type of course, right? Because you're going to be up and down the whole time. So it's really going to be more about effort and seeing where the paces average out later on. All right. Jeremy, I am used to doing ultra marathons. What is the best way to build speed and endurance with speed? So, I'm not a big ultra guy. That's not necessarily my cup of tea, but from my understanding with ultras, and I guess I don't know if he's asking training for in general or for an ultra marathon. So I guess I would need more information on that, Jeremy. So what are we talking about? Are we trying to train for something else or training for speed for an ultra? So if you can jump back on there, I can probably answer that a little better. Anna, is the Hanson Marathon method an acceptable training plan for someone in slower groups? I'm currently aiming to get at 4:30. I've heard this plan help due to large mileage around less time spent recovering from super slow long runs. Yes, that is true. You have heard right. So no, I would say 4:30 is a very common time for people running the Hanson plan. The only thing I would say is, even if you've run marathons before, I would probably go beginner plan. I wouldn't get stuck on that beginner title because it is probably a lot more like an intermediate plan, to say the least, probably a little bit more than an intermediate plan. So that's where I would start out with and give yourself a little bit more building up into that mileage. And then the other thing I would say, if you follow that beginner plan, really stick to paces. Don't push too hard on those, because that's going to be the biggest thing. You have to learn how to active recovery. So recover with easy runs and then workouts every few days. So running the right paces is going to be crucial. All right. John is asking, Boston was my first Hanson plan. I'm doing London next. I don't know which plan. So again, which plan did you use? But yeah, I would probably need more information on that too. I need to know what plan you were using, so we know kind of what volume you were and if that worked out well for you. So, Tiffany, how should I adjust my strength training throughout a marathon plan? We went over that pretty in depth. Warm up miles before tempo speed sessions. Yes. So if you've read the book, if you haven't read the book, that would be the first place I would start. But yes, 1 to 3 miles, depending on what your volume for the day wants to be. But yes, do a warm up in the plans I offer in the book, and then in the final surge, we do warm ups with, we also have dynamic warming up, and then strides and drills that are put in there as well. So, yeah. Tiffany's asking, does the Run Club include your strength plans? Yes, the Run Club, you have access to everything. You have access to all 3 rounds of the Strength for Runners. 2 of them are completely updated. Nikki's done that. She has more that she is doing. All she needs is time, about a month without a child, and then, yeah, that would be good. Would be done. So, but she is working on those, and she's actually working on some full mobility plans that are going to be available fairly soon, I think. So yes, they are all in the Run Club library. The glute is in there as well. So it is all in there. And then Jeremy, so speed for the marathon. So our plans address that really well. So you put together, the first segment of your the marathon plan is going to be dedicated to speed, and then you move into strength in the longer tempo. So that's what I would do. And then if you need to, like what we do with our marathoners, is we really just kind of have them not race marathons all the time, and then do other stuff, right? So perfect example. Right now, a lot of people finish up spring marathons, finishing up their downtime. What they're going to do is like a 5 to 10K segment over the next few months, and really just kind of get their 5Ks and 10Ks down, and then they're going to come back to a fall marathon. So there's a lot of ways you can do it. I would say if you've never done one of our plans, a lot of times that's just enough to improve your speed, because we address all the issues in the marathon plans. But the other thing too is, if all you've done is race ultras, it might make sense to step down to another distance for a little bit, and then go to the marathon. So there's a few things you can do there. And John, Boston 75-mile week plan. So 75, I don't know, do I have a 24-week 75-mile plan? I don't know if I do, but if you do, that's a long schedule. It's 75 miles a week. So I would say, if you're running that kind of volume and you run regularly, I would say something in the 14 to 16 week range at 70 to 80 miles a week at peak would be where you need to be, and that would be good for you. Yeah, 14. As I say, I think I have a 24-week plan. So 14 to 16 weeks. I like that. 70 to 80 miles a week, you should be pretty good, because that's you'll actually probably feel a little refreshed without all the hills in the Boston plan. So that'd be nice. Probably a little change, get after some different gears for London. I keep forgetting London's in October this year. So, all right. Yeah, so no problem. I like doing these, answering those up. Oh, so Mike here is the one I missed here. Have you considered updating? Well, okay, so John, I have a lot of plans, right? So the advanced plan is going to take you to about 60 miles a week, 60, 65 miles a week. But if you go into final surge and find my plans, I have a ton of marathon plans. They're broken up. They're not beginner, advanced, intermediate, stuff like that. They're more weeks you want to run, volume you want to hit. And that's how they're broken up, because I feel like that's probably more appropriate than just labeling something beginner, intermediate, and advanced. So if you look in there, you should see a fair number of plans that are 14 to 16 weeks, plenty of different mileage ranges. All right, let me jump up here to Mike's real quick. Have you considered updating the Enhanced Marathon Method book? Example, tonight you said half marathon, 4 to 5 weeks is okay. Book only mentions races at weeks 4 or 6 in the 18-week plan. Possibly, but I've talked about that so much, so I don't know. But it's not really up to me to update the book. I don't. I didn't publish it, so I wrote it, but I didn't publish it. So people have to rely more on like what I'm writing in this community and stuff like that. And I think that's where we are. That's where we're at. So yeah, I mean, if well, I mean, VeloPress doesn't even exist anymore. So they were bought by Pocket Outdoor Media, which was bought by Outdoor Magazine. So I couldn't even tell you who publishes the book anymore. But if they ever wanted to update the book, I would be happy. But of course, that takes I'd have to talk to Kevin Keith about that too, because it's their plans. So I just wrote the information. I just did the writing. So not really up to me. But yeah, I mean, I would like to write maybe another. I would like to write maybe different books on just different training stuff. But we'll see. All right. So 45 minutes, guys. That's good. We try to move it right along. All right. So if there's no other questions. We had 47 people register. We had 14 online now. I think it's 15 or 16 at one point, which is pretty good. Pretty good. And the recording will be available. And other than that, I don't think there's much. Oh, I wanted to show you guys some stuff here. So if you want to take a look, so I showed you how to adjust the training paces. Let me share my screen real quick. I'll show you what I am talking about as far as the Run Club stuff. Let's go into here. All right. So if you are this is what I am logged in. So I can go to activity. You can see we have a lot of stuff going on in here. So, all right. So lots of stuff being posted, all my recent posts, events. Oh, yeah, June 7th for Run Club members, the feed webinar. So if you aren't familiar with, we now have a partnership with thefeed.com. And so our athletes get a little something every quarter, some credits to spend in the feed to buy their nutrition products, which is pretty sweet. I'm very thankful. They actually approached us, so that was good. Events. And then that's the only one coming up. So, but the really stuff I want to show you is the group stuff. So we have groups, and so we have all these groups. Like we've added chasing the unicorn, goal, chasing 4 hours, 3 hours, 3:30. So a lot of the groups like Run Club. If you sign up for the Run Club, you're automatically enrolled in this. You're also automatically enrolled in the LHR community. I like those groups for those two because I can actually send individual messages to people right through the group, a lot like Facebook. But nobody really, we have the main activity feed, which I just showed you. And the problem with this, like if we go into LHR community, what you have is now you can have the main feed, but then you can also have a forum in here as well. And so it's kind of confusing. So what I'm doing more now is going into the forums. And so this gives you way more kind of customizable activity. So we'll click on the half marathon, the whole forum just for that. So one, if you wanted to just subscribe to the whole forum, you could just subscribe to that. So then you would be notified when somebody made a post. The nice thing is, let's find one I'm not already involved in. All right. So Duncan asked this a while ago. Let's say I'm not in this forum. I'm not in this thread on the forum, but let's say, hey, I want to know more about this. I want to be notified when this comes in. I can just subscribe to this, and anytime this thread gets updated, I'll be notified, right? So to me, that's like a lot better, right? Because if you were doing the activity feed, you don't get notified. You have to manually come in and check. So you have a lot more, and then you can also favorite it as well. So you have a lot more stuff that you can do with that. So that's why I'm going to move more towards some of the forum stuff. And trust me, those forums, like you can post pictures in there. You can, I mean, it's essentially an activity feed, but in forum style. So it's not like, that despicable looking thing on like letsrun.com or whatever. Like it's a pretty robust situation. I mean, you can post a lot of different stuff in there. So, and then you can get the threaded replies to that, which makes it nice. And so you can have some really in-depth discussions. I like that more. So like the activity feed is more for like, hey, I just crushed this workout, give me a thumbs up or whatever. It's great. But, I don't necessarily want that to be something where people are just flipping through, right? People are coming there for a specific reason. They're trying to find information. So I feel like the more we keep it on point, the more that will happen, right? All right. So that's some stuff we're working on, and then adding more stuff as far as courses. Coach Alex is actually, so if you have kids, Coach Alex is going to be doing a high school group. We actually have high school plans. But we don't ever use them. And so he was the coach locally here at Fraser High School for a little while, and then he coached at Rochester University for a couple of years. No reason he left was because his wife is a big time engineer at GM, and so they had a kid, and it was actually cheaper for him to just quit his job and be daddy daycare. So it wasn't like he was fired or anything. It was just, Rochester University is probably about maybe 1,000 kids. So his room for advancement wasn't the highest there. But anyway, he works for us. He's going to do the high school group. We're going to get that up on the website pretty soon, probably early next week or late this week. And then, I think, from now, we're already mid-May. Fall marathon training is going to start, in a month to 6 weeks for a lot of people. So we'll probably just be doing a lot more discussions in the run club and stuff, like kind of working through the plans, take it, segment by segment, as far as each one of the plans. So there's a lot of stuff we can do with that, and then kind of be guiding factors in there. So it should see a lot more stuff in there. So, so hopefully we're just trying to, recognize there's holes, what's in there and what's not in there right now. But we're making a much more conscious effort to do that. But it's hard because we actually, knock on wood, COVID was hard, right? The industry was basically shut down for 2 years, and we probably lost, I don't know, probably close to 50% of our business. Yeah, I mean, it was, and I'm not complaining. I mean, it is what it is. But I'm just saying, like, we survived it. I know a lot of people weren't able to make it out for, in their industries and stuff like that. So very thankful that we're here. And we're actually back. Our numbers are back to where they were pre-COVID as far as individually coaching people, which is nice to have, but it's also tough because that takes a lot of individual time with our coaches. So it's hard to add content again. So we have to figure something out. So I would personally like to step away from individually coaching and just focusing more on this content creation, stuff like that. So to do that, we'd probably have to find some other coaches, which, I always have these ideas, but they always somebody else does them. So like I was actually wanting to do like a kind of a certification type of thing, and then just more of like a directory on our site and having people, hey, I would love to have people, but I want to make sure that they're kind of following our philosophy, and especially if they're using our type of situation. So that might be something we're looking into doing as well, because that would take some pressure off of our OG coaches, Mike, Melissa, myself, Josh, because, they're more part-time than full-time coaches. So, but yeah, it's a good problem to have, I guess. So can't complain about that. So, all right. So I was kind of stalling there to see if any other questions would come in, but no other questions are coming in. I appreciate you guys for jumping on. It's always a good discussion. Some great questions were asked, and hopefully that helped out some other people. I'll post this. So I'll post this on my site. I'll post this in the Facebook group as well. So if you guys see it on the Facebook group, just give it a like or something. Help spread that bad boy around. All right. So without further ado, have a great rest of your evening. And I hope you enjoyed yourself and I hope you learned some stuff out of this. So, all right. I will talk to you guys later. Take it easy.